Barrister Aqeel Malik Sab. I wanted to ask you questions at the end because I wanted you to hear our other panelists first and um, get a sense of the kind of harassment that we are speaking about, the scale of it, the scope of it. So I'd like your response on that. That is one aspect of my question to you. The other thing that I wanted you to shed some light on was with the fact that when we're talking about this current drive, it began in 2023. It began under the caretaker government. The caretaker government had no mandate. There was no parliament. There's a very strong perception about the caretaker government that it was the security establishment's front. And that this policy comes from them, that this is not a civilian policy, but that this is a security establishment's policy, and that this civilian government is sort of providing the front for it and is implementing it on their behalf. So if we have a parliament now, since 2024, we've not seen any substantial discussion on this in the parliament. We've seen discussions in certain committees, but the discussions relate more to numbers and figures of Afghans who've been expelled, not so much about their rights or about their dignity or about what has been happening with them. So, I mean, what is the government's position on this, with this? And the third and the final aspect of my question to you would be that, as has been discussed earlier, there is no state in Afghanistan at this time. Pakistan, like I mentioned in my introduction, has had a major role in Afghanistan, so we do bear some responsibility. So we've not done a favor to Afghans by hosting them, but it was also a consequence of our interventions that we have engaged in when it comes to Afghanistan. And knowing what we are sending them back to, especially Afghan women and girls, and now with the Taliban justifying slavery, for instance, gender apartheid is already there. They're also stripping away their legal personhood. So a woman who's being beaten up cannot get divorced, for instance. That is one of the edicts that has also come out in the recent penal code. So I wanted your response, the government's response on how does the government, and again, security is easy, as some of our other panelists said. We've expelled more than 1 million Afghans, but terrorism hasn't stopped. It has only increased. So certainly there's more to terrorism than just Afghans and blaming them. I mean, so your responses to these questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the opportunity, and it's truly an honor to be sharing this panel with very learned experts in their respective fields. Lots of questions and lots of comments that have been made, but I think I'll sort of begin from just reiterating the position. I mean, of course, this fora is certainly one where one has to be very candid. And I think if I present you the government's official position, that probably wouldn't do justice to this fora itself. But I think some of the thoughts that I'll be sharing or presenting before with my fellow panelists as well, and as to the audience, I would certainly wouldn't be mincing my words. So be rest assured with that. Of course, the government's policy is certainly in place, and I think I'll start with the 2023. But I think before we start with 2023, we'll have to go back in time, not so far back in the 70s or the 80s, but I think let's just stick to the near future, the fall of Kabul in 2021. And if you really have been following the events and the government in place at the time, I'm not going to criticize anybody, but I think we also need to be aware that security has been a real concern and an issue in Pakistan. Having said that, one of the issues, I think, with the current crisis that have sort of blossomed or bloomed with regards to the refugees being sent back, of course, you'll have to see of how they actually entered the country. And I think Pakistan alone is not to be blamed in all of this, because after the fall of Kabul in 2021, certain promises were made by some Western countries as well. And this is part of the problem. And I think you can't just wash away your hands and just say, well, we're done now because we've provided a third safe country
Recording in progress.
For those refugees or for those asylum seekers that were brought to Pakistan, left not just on the doorstep, but of course, were facilitated to have entered the country without any document. I mean, I know so many cases, and I'm sure some of my panelists will also agree with the fact that people entered on photocopies of their passports. People entered on photocopies of their tazkiras. So this is something, you can't, I mean, in a very civilized society or, any other country would not permit this. I know as a Pakistani, I would not be able to enter any country, whether over land or through air, without a proper, valid international travel document. And that's my passport. So the current crisis, so to speak, whether that's connected with the security, whether that's connected with the asylum seekers or refugees, or the situation in general in Afghanistan, you'll have to see it from that perspective. We had a lot of these individuals that had crossed because they were promised a safe passage, because Pakistan was supposed to be a transiting point. But at the same time, of course, we know that COVID took place, and then, the Western countries, I'm not going to mince my words, and there's no other better way to say it, they just forgot about these individuals. And I'm happy to share this with you very candidly, because this is the forum for that. When the deportations were taking place, and not just the deportations, these refugees or asylum seekers that were on their way to safer third countries. And Pakistan was only supposed to be a transiting point for them. But of course, that transit period exceeded more than 3 years. I mean, the fall of Kabul in 2021, and we're now in 2026. So that's quite a long period of time. But one of the European ambassadors had reached out to me, and they said, because the government now has this policy from 2023, so we don't know, and we have these people on the list. And I said, well, have you shared this list with any of the authorities? Well, according to them, apparently, this list was shared. But of course, when you have a huge number of asylum seekers or refugees or those that are in transit or waiting to be taken to that third country as per the promise that was made by the Western country, of course, I'm not going to denounce that some of them who were still waiting might have actually gotten deported through these deportation camps. And this is something, I mean, of course, there's certain, there might have been a few cases where the procedure might not have been followed in true letter and spirit. I'm also not going to mince my words on this. But at the same time, you'll have to see the bigger picture. One of the things that was, one of the questions or the concerns that was posed perhaps was with regards to the decision of the caretaker government. We, at the time, because obviously you say the caretaker government was perhaps allegedly, according to you, was a mask for the establishment, but I do not agree with that. Even though the caretaker government sort of exceeded their timeline that they were supposed to be in that position, or in, in taking care of things for the interim period. Of course, a decision by the caretaker government, and we've got notifications to this effect, that any decision that will be taken by the caretaker government through this period of time, if it pertains to the security or the national security of the country, or foreign relations, or any other matters pertaining to within sort of this area, then it will be legitimized and it will be carried forward as per the policy of the state. The other things that you had mentioned, Pakistan's position on the refugees now. I mean, to be very frank and fair with you, we've been hospitable for over 40 years. And I'm not saying that we shouldn't be, we should be. But I think also how and what I've seen thus far, the position of the government is very clear. We have prioritized the safety, the security, the sovereignty, and the national security of not just our country, but also our citizens. And that's what you see in other parts of the world as well. We're not an anomaly. We're not different to what's been happening in the United States, in the European countries, in other countries as well. Of course, we have to prioritize the safety and security of our citizens because we cannot bear any further losses than we already have. And one has to see it from a pragmatic point of view, or from the point of view of prioritizing not just our country but also our citizens. And you'll have to really do. It's a balancing act of how I see it. And I mean, of course, the scales might tilt, on the other side at times. But also, you'll have to see that we've been working very closely with the UNHCR, not just from now, but for the past, many, many, many years. Even though we're not signatory to the 1951 Refugee Convention, but we have been hosting refugees and we have been hosting asylum seekers. There's been many judgments from the courts, but of course there's been various legislations or amendments as well within the Pakistan Citizenship Act as well. But of course, I think anywhere you see this trend in other countries of the world as well, and this is really very candidly being shared here, and I'm happy to share this. Are we really that blind not to see those asylum seekers and refugees at the doorstep of Europe? Have we forgotten the island of Lesbos in Greece? Have we really forgotten those asylum seekers and refugees and their economic migrants? I have no qualms in accepting this, but being shot with straight fires on those boats in the middle of the Mediterranean Sea. Where's the UNHCR then? Where are the other UN agencies? Nobody's speaking about this, but when it comes to Pakistan, I mean, I know, but of course, with a lot of, of course, you have offices in other parts of the world as well, but nobody's actually condemning that. But what gets condemned is what happens in Pakistan, because that's, maybe perhaps more palatable or appealable. No offense to anybody and to none of the UN agencies. We really admire your incredible work and we are willing and wanting to work with you. But of course, you'll have to see and you'll have to understand the perspective that, or our sort of perspective from our citizens, from our country, from our people as well. We've been at the forefront of this for far too long now. And I think the decision that was made was really, of course, we believe in the dignified return of the refugees. We have various options, which obviously, we've had the Afghan origin card, the proof of registration card. And again, there might have been a few cases where there might have been, POR card holders. They might have actually gotten deported in these, and by mistake. Not on purpose, but going back to the main issue of how the situation in Afghanistan is right now. Why is it that all of the countries of the world, they've allowed Afghanistan and the Afghan Taliban regime to operate until now, since 2021 till 2026? Nobody's willing to engage with them. And I'm not saying Pakistan, but it's the rest of the world as well. And everybody's got their own issues. The US or the other countries, the European countries, everybody's got their own issues. But of course, when it comes to, because we're right next door, so it's easy to point fingers at us. Let that not be the case. We definitely understand, we hold the human rights in the highest of regards, and we obviously understand the plight of the women and the girls in Afghanistan. Of course, we've condemned that at all forums as well. From the government, as well as the civil society, everybody. And we really believe that in order to be able to work with UN agencies, with the rest of the world, and Afghanistan as well, we'll have to find a collective solution to the issue of or the aftermath of 2021, the fall of Kabul, because it really baffles me at times that you have a regime there and nobody's actually willing to address the issues, but everybody is going to point fingers when it comes to other parts of the world, including Pakistan. So it's a matter of conscience as well. And I think countries have shifted from, again, I could be wrong, but that's my personal understanding, not the government's understanding. So let me be very frank and clear about this, that we've sort of had that shift from a rights, upholding the rights or the rights-based approach to a security-centric or security or protective. And like you said, you're quite right in pointing that, but that's a trend that's seen all over the world. So, and lastly, when you said terrorism and Afghanistan, there's been many cases, irrefutable evidence, where Afghan citizens and Afghan soil has been used in a number of times. And I'm not making this up, because obviously now being part of the government, I see things, and I've seen things from both sides as well. So it's very difficult, and I'm not going to play the blame game,
Sure.
But equally, when you find that irrefutable evidence one too many times, whether that's the regime or the proscribed organizations or the banned outfits that have been operating freely on the Afghan soil, planning attacks against Pakistani citizens, and just trying to create a mayhem and chaos in Pakistan, that cannot be left unaddressed.
Sure.
That needs to be addressed. But overall, the government is definitely committed, and like I said, I think the last point I would certainly want to make is that we've got a one-document regime now, even though we have a porous border, we've fenced it, but still we find that we still have illegal crossings into Pakistan, and also vice versa, back to Afghanistan as well. And lastly, a new visa policy which is in pipeline after all of these repatriations, and we are almost we've finalized this new visa policy, which will actually attract, and like I think some of the one of the participants or the panelists had questioned that, let them have businesses here. Of course, we're not stopping anybody from having their businesses or having businesses in Pakistan, whether that be Afghan or any other citizen. So we're going to encourage, and the reason and the point, or the thought process behind this new visa policy is for those Afghans who have the means, who already have businesses here, they will have to come the proper way and the right way through legitimate and legal means.
Sure.
I hope I've tried to sort of cover everything.
Thank you so much.